thanks a lot to your organization for inviting UNEP for this very important topic which you are discussing today. And I was going through this agenda and I was very pleased to see the kind of perspectives that have been brought in a one single day on such an important issue, which our country is, and not only country, the whole world is facing. And I listened to some of the presentations with a lot of interest. So thanks a lot for inviting me and inviting my organization for this event. I was also hearing the fire chat and a couple of points that were raised, and I thought I'll try to speak around some of the issues that the last presenter and Dr. Anurag talked about, and try to talk about these issues from a perspective of the United Nations. Two things. One, certainly segregation and recycling at the household level is such an important aspect, but often neglected because our whole culture globally has been towards landfills. And we've been moving towards creating new landfills everywhere, which are becoming major disasters. And household segregation is something that is a big solution. And certainly teaching students in the schools is a very important element. But we need to also take action now on the ground. And I'll just give an example of what we did in our sector where I live in Noida. I moved into India after almost 21 years, 3 years back. I was working with UN Environment Program in Bangkok and in Paris, and moved back to India 3 years back. And we settled down in Noida in a pretty good sector where we saw that waste management was certainly not a big priority, even though people were investing a lot of money on the houses they were building there. So we, in fact, the ladies in our sector, they got together and formed a Green Crusaders team and trained and built capacity of each and every household and the help they had at their houses to do segregation at the household level. And I'm very proud to say that with those efforts over a period of few months, we were able to reduce our waste that was going to the landfill from 100% to almost about 15%. So 85% of that waste we were managing within our sector and converting into compost. And it didn't need a lot of investments, and it needed a lot of human effort, but it didn't need too much of investment, and it needed a mechanism to be put in place. If we can do it in all sectors or all housing colonies or everywhere, I think your end expenditure at managing the waste when it reaches landfill, what Malik Saab was also talking about, and he represents a very important organization which manages these, those kind of expenditures will be minimized. And then I was also taken up by what during the fireside chat Dr. Anurag mentioned about action plan. We really need to build an action plan now, and we are really racing against time. I'm not going to go into statistics to frighten you of environmental damages that we have all done in the last 50 years, but certainly I'll highlight that we are now facing a triple planetary crisis of climate change, crisis of nature, and crisis of pollution. And these three-pronged crises which we are facing are making our world certainly not a better place to live in. Our Secretary General, in a recent talk to the students at Columbia University, mentioned this triple planetary crisis and also said that we are waging a war against nature. And this war needs to stop. We need to make peace with nature. And that is a very important mindset each and every individual on this earth will need to not only integrate into their psyche, but also take action to do environmental mitigation. And that's where the need for the environmental action plan, which was being talked in the fireside chat, becomes very important. What has India done in this regard? And you all have been hearing about the strides that are being taken to address climate change. The fact that India is one of the very few countries globally that is meeting its NDC targets, and that in the Glasgow, the Prime Minister mentioned, and also the targets that will be increased by 2030 and the net zero by 2070. The solar energy targets that have been announced by the Prime Minister are very well known by 2030. So there are certainly a lot of action that is happening. I also heard a lot about the EPR guidelines that have just come out, about the rules that are there on e-waste, on plastic waste, on solid waste, on construction. So there is a whole plethora of environmental governance around, but the need also is how does one implement those effectively? And that's where the role of industry is going to be very, very important. No EPR rule in the world can become successful unless industry adopts it wholeheartedly and implements it. And that is what is needed in India also. What more has India done? And I also heard discussions around circular economy and linear economy. And I'm very happy to say that the Niti Aayog has set up 11 committees along with the concerned line ministries, focusing on 11 end-of-life products or recyclable materials or wastes that continue to pose considerable challenge. And that, I think, is a very important step that has been taken to address recycling issues, to address end-of-life issues in a variety of sectors, whether they are manufacturing sectors, whether they are supply chains, whether they are vehicles, steel industry, and what have you. So I think that's a very important step that has been taken. And initiatives like National Hydrogen Mission on vehicle scrappage policy, or draft policy on blue economy, the National Cooling Action Plan, which has been made. India, of course, is one of the rare countries that has a National Clean Air Action Plan and a National Cooling Action Plan as a strategic move to address these two major problems. What is UNEP doing in this regard is that UNEP is a new office that has been set up in India about 4 years back. And we are working very closely with the government, central government and the state governments. And we are also working closely with some of the industry. We certainly need to scale up our efforts and also scale up our outreach. And I'm happy that I'm representing UNEP in this very important forum. And I really look forward that we work with BW on taking this UNEP work to the industry and to various other stakeholders. So coming to the action plan that we were talking about, I would like to conclude with a few steps or a few suggestions on what could be India's path ahead on environmental mitigation. What are those few areas which will need a focus in the coming 10 years in the what is called the decade of action, 2020 to 2030. And I'd like to conclude by highlighting a few of those suggestions and steps which could form the action plan that Dr. Anurag was talking about. First, certainly government should use this pandemic recovery to shift gears to circularity in 2022. That is a very important step, that the investment that is coming to for pandemic recovery should look at circularity, should look at green economy as the basic approach to economic development. Also, this needs to scale up and outreach to different states, union territories, and cities for implementation of policy programs, plans, and projects on environmental mitigation. That's a very important point for any action plan that India needs to look at to not only meet their NDCs, but to meet other targets also. I think India should also ensure smooth and faster influx of renewable energy options in power and industrial sectors. And that is a very important step if the target of 450 gigawatt by 2030 is to be met. Another thing is the Indian government and all stakeholders in India should think beyond 2024 for the National Clean Air Program. National Clean Air Program has objectives and targets till 2024. We need to start looking at beyond 24 because the air pollution problem that India has, and North India particularly, is going to be a long-term problem. It will not be sorted out in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's going to be at least a decade-long focused intervention with billions of dollars to be invested by the governments, by the industry, by stakeholders before this problem can be addressed adequately. One more important thing, which was also mentioned in the fireside chat, and I think that is going to form a very important part of this action plan, is the influencing and increasing people's participation in triggering a 3R approach in circularity. That is going to be key and cornerstone for any effort that is needed. Improving the ability of small and medium enterprises is also going to be a very important part. So finally, I would like to conclude that other than the role of governments, the private sector and financial institutions, scientific and educational bodies, media, households, labor organizations, and civil society groups will have to all be well positioned to support this transformation of circularity. It cannot be done just by the government alone. It has to be a stakeholder-wide kind of an initiative. And that's the message I wanted to also convey. I would again like to thank BW team for inviting me and inviting my organization for this important topic, and thanks a lot.